Hello, hello. Thank you for joining us, friends, for another exciting Ram Chat. I'm very thrilled today to tell you that we are welcoming Congresswoman Cindy Axne from Iowa to the conversation today. We could go on about her for a very long time, but I want you to know that she's been recognized as one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. I think the most bipartisan member of Congress from her home state, and is someone who's really revered for something that we tout here at Renew America Movement, and that is working as part of a common sense coalition in Washington, D.C. So, Congresswoman, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, it's so good to be here. Glad to have the time to talk to folks.
It's great to have you, especially as part of this group. As you know, we're a band of moderate Republicans and Democrats who like to reach across the aisle and talk to folks who reach across the aisle, and that's actually where I want to kick us off today. I'm curious to ask you, Congresswoman. Let's cut through the noise of the normally very down news that we see when we open up the papers in the morning and we go to our news websites. Talk about things that are working there in Washington, D.C. What's top of mind for you at the moment that you're working on in the U.S. Capitol, and in a place maybe the American people don't know that there's good collaboration and cooperation happening behind the scenes?
Well, listen, I think there's a lot of support right now, of course, when it comes to infrastructure and making sure that we get this bill that we passed into law out into the American public and working for this country. So I think that when we find opportunities along those routes, there's a lot of support for bipartisanship. I think about broadband. Iowa is ranked at the bottom of the barrel, 49th in the country when it comes to broadband connectivity, and how that has become a bellwether for bipartisanship. But I'm also I serve on agriculture committee, and that is one of the most bipartisan committees out in Congress. We have been able to find common ground around energy. Obviously, producing energy in our own country helps us on so many levels, not just about putting fuel in our car, but also national security issues. So I would say that in those areas, we're finding a lot of common ground. And then I've had success in working with my Iowa colleagues in particular on bills like my Sergeant Ketchum Rural Veterans Mental Health Act, bringing support to all states in America where we have difficulty finding the service that our soldiers need when they come back home stateside, and that our veterans need to live a productive life. I would say there's a lot of ways that we can find bipartisanship. You really just have to, you have to go in and be friends with folks. You can't just expect that they're going to get on bills just because you walk the halls. You've got to learn how to develop relationships with people.
So tell me a little bit more about the infrastructure bill. I mean, Americans right now are really worried about inflation. Look, I'm worried about inflation. I look at the bill when I leave the grocery store. There's a lot of concern, but some of that has resulted in some of the good policies that were in the infrastructure bill getting lost in the noise. What are some other areas that Americans are going to see hopeful developments as a result of that legislation, as opposed to some of the concerns that they've got about rising inflation at the moment?
Right. Well, let's keep in mind, too, when we talk about the infrastructure bill, fully a third of it is funding that would have had to been authorized. Transportation funding that your state, no matter where you're at, here in Iowa, our Department of Transportation would have received funding to help with upkeep, right, of our roads. So keep that in mind when we talk about these big numbers. And I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of times there's this framing on national television from some outlets that talk about this number without putting the truth behind it. And in this case, with the $1.7 trillion, over $500 million of that was going to be reauthorized funding to begin with. But let's talk about where the rubber hits the road. We've been wanting an infrastructure package to happen in this country for decades. We have not seen the kind of support that we've needed at a federal level to protect America and ensure that our infrastructure is as sound and strong as any other country that's out there actually investing in it, like China. And so it's about time we got this done. President Trump talked about it. President Obama talked about it. President Bush talked about it. So let's go out there and brag about this because we finally got this done. And here's what it means for states like Iowa. I never go out and talk about, oh, we have $438 million here or $358 million. That doesn't matter. What matters here in states like Iowa and across this country is the fact that that bridge that has been so derelict for so long that the kids on the bus route have to take the long way around and their morning is 40 minutes longer. I can't tell you, there isn't another mom out there that doesn't want an extra 40 minutes in the morning, either for her kids to sleep or to get them a decent breakfast, enough time to pack a lunch. That's what we've got to go out and sell to the American public, because this is truly what it is. It's infrastructure for today. It's addressing those things like getting your kids some extra sleep because we fixed that bridge, which then fixed the bus route. And that's how I'm going out and talking to people. It's not about, oh, we're going to address this, that, or the other thing. It's about what money is going to be in your pocket, what's going to make your family's life a little bit easier, and what opportunities does your family now have as a result of this bill. So I think in general, literally, I could win just on this bill. So I go out and talk about it a lot.
Well, Congresswoman, when you mentioned the bill just now, you talked about competing with China. And this is something that's very top of mind for a lot of Americans who've just been watching the Olympics. A good chunk of that was a propaganda video for the Chinese Communist Party. There's a lot of concern in this country about the competition with the Chinese government. You've been working on some of those issues in Congress and making sure that we remain competitive with rival nation states. Could you talk a little bit about some of those conversations happening behind the scenes in Washington, D.C.? There's a number of different bills. Help us sort through the clutter. What do you think Congress is going to be able to do this year to really ramp up America's competition, with countries like China and Russia and others, especially when it comes to technology?
Well, first and foremost, getting this infrastructure bill out will really help with this. If folks aren't aware, not only is China investing in their own country with clean energy, technology, and ensuring that there's connectivity for their citizens, they're going around the world and building out infrastructure in places that they hope to look to in the future to be allies. If they're coming in and spending money to upgrade facilities in other countries, they expect to go in there in the future and get their support. And we can't let that go away from people's viewpoint, because I think that most folks aren't realizing what's happening around the world. But the one big thing that I would say we've got to do is start making products here in America. When we started out with COVID, only 5% of the personal protective equipment that we needed in this country was made here. We were reliant on China for our masks, for gloves, all of that. And if folks remember back, we had healthcare providers wearing garbage bags, reusing their masks, all because we had offshored throughout decades because of multiple reasons, jobs overseas that have left us in many states like Iowa, left us behind. We needed those good manufacturing jobs. So this Competes Act that we're working on right now, that we've passed out of the House, of course, and the Senate has passed out, and their version will come together in conference, and then we'll get the final version put together and over to the president's desk. Helps us address that. Helps us address the need for manufacturing here in this own country. A commission that will look at the structures in place to ensure that we put better framework around our businesses, our economy, and in general, our infrastructure and technology in general, so that we don't ever get to this point again. Because, Miles, we shouldn't be at a point where things are so bottom of the barrel that we're waiting for decades to get a decent package through and an infrastructure to fix it. We need to be ahead of the game. We are the leaders of the free world. We have got to step up and represent that. So the Competes Act puts us in a really strong position to not just get back in the game that the way we should be, to produce products here and become less reliant on China and create good paying jobs here, by the way, but it also sets up a future for us that we don't get stuck in this quagmire again. So whether it's working on issues like that, or part of my supply chain agenda, which has multiple aspects of it, like some of the bills we have already passed out of that and gotten into law, the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, where we were being strangleholded here because Large shipping companies were literally letting our containers go out 70% empty. We'll usually have about a 10% trade deficit in this country, but they were running roughshod over us because they made more money bringing goods here from China, dropping them off, and then hightailing it back to get more at the expense of our manufacturers and our people's jobs here to get our goods out the door. So we've got two pieces of legislation that address this right now: the Competes Act, which is our version for the Senate companion, and the infrastructure bill. We put these pieces together, and within a matter of a few years, we will start seeing a whole new different reality for keeping America's security at a much better level.
That's very exciting to hear. And I think folks don't understand how much extraordinary work has happened over the past few years in this realm. I want to pivot, though, to another nation state rival that's driving the news and capturing a lot of American attention. And that's what's happening with the Russians in Ukraine. Now, you couldn't blame Americans in Iowa or Ohio or Florida for watching the news and saying, why does this matter to me if Moscow goes and invades and gets all the way to Kiev? What do you tell your constituents when it comes to this issue, and why we should be concerned as a country and paying attention to what's happening in Eastern Europe?
Well, first and foremost, we've always got to defend countries that are pushing for democracy and who we can look to as allies for our country's security. Yes, I understand that we have the best military, that we are a strong country, and we are seen as a world leader. But we're also only as strong as those who work with us around the world. And so that's a really important piece. And for Iowa, what that means directly, I would say, goes back to trade. Trade is one of the biggest components, in particular with agriculture, for Iowa's success. I'll think about when tariffs were put on and we lost business here under the former administration. Who stepped in? Russia was actually selling soybeans. So we lost business here in Iowa because they could sell products and get in with other countries that we had lost business with. So for us, it was absolutely a monetary issue. So I can take this really right down to the corn or the soybeans in our field and talk about why it's so important that we support other countries and democracies and not allow Russia to invade and to take out places that are strongholds for us in Europe for our country's national security, let alone let a rival trade, somebody who we don't see as one of our best trade partners, gain more opportunity and to take away our business. So I think it's a twofold piece here for states like Iowa.
We're in a very, it seems, fraught moment when it comes to democracy, not just around the world, but at home. Certainly, we're worried about the external threats to democracy from nation states like China and Russia. But of course, here at home, we're experiencing extraordinary strain on the democratic system. You and I have spoken a little bit about the January 6th Select Committee and what's happening there. I'm curious to get your read on how that investigation is progressing and what you think that will mean, not just for American politics this year, but for the American people when the Select Committee drops its report.
Well, obviously, I'm very much in support of the Select Committee and voted for it. Our country was attacked by its own citizens. To think that we have members of Congress that don't believe that should have been looked into is astounding to me. The one piece that all elected officials should hold them to is the fact that we are representatives to the people we serve, but without upholding the Constitution and the framework behind a free and fair America, we won't be able to do the work that we need to do for our constituents. So it will always be my number one concern here is to make sure that I uphold the democracy in this country. And I think that the commission is doing that. I'm really proud to see some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that are serving on it and who have stepped up to, I think, be a great voice for America and to show everybody that not everybody is beholden to our former president, nor are they beholden to a party. Because I tell this story here all the time. I don't care what letter's behind anybody's name. I really don't. You could be a Democrat, Republican, or independent. I'm here to work for everybody. And if we just sent more people out to Washington that believe that way and knew that their job was to represent the people we serve, we'd get a heck of a lot more done. But in the meantime, we've got members who are dead set on destroying our democratic process in this country, and don't want people to look into how we pass on the free and fair elections that make us who we are. So it's very disturbing to me that anybody would push back against this. I'm glad to see that I think they're getting a lot of information that they need. I've been very unhappy during this process when I've seen some people who have literally shrug the law and think that they're above it to not have to deliver information or testify. I think that though that has given even greater impetus to folks like Cheney and Kinzinger to support from their side of things that, no, you need to get in here and help us with this. And so I was glad that the committee was set up the way that it has been, because I think it's shown the American people that we can find representatives who will always be there for you, backing up our country, and it doesn't matter what side they're from, and they will be there when we're having difficulty as well getting the information we need. So we'll see what comes out in the report. I certainly know what I saw. We have insurrectionists from my district. As a matter of fact, one of the folks running against me was out in Washington on that day. And so we've got to address this, because that is not how you go about in our country addressing concerns that you have with our election system by attacking our Capitol.
Well, I think you put that in a really compelling way. I've said before, on January 6th, we saw people try to storm the Capitol and undermine democracy from the outside. And now some of these same people are running for Congress to go do it from the inside. In fact, over at Renew America Movement, we've tracked that there are at least 24 people running for public office in the United States this cycle who were in Washington on January 6th, participated in the protests and then in the insurrection. That's very concerning. In fact, an even more worrisome number is that we've got at least 75 people running for Congress this cycle who believe the election was stolen from Donald Trump. I want to ask you what these conversations are like behind the scenes. I'm a lifelong Republican. I worked as a staffer on Capitol Hill. And as Donald Trump was making his way upward in the Republican nominating process in 2016, virtually all of these Republican members of Congress said he was a clown, he was a goof. Even once he got elected, behind the scenes, they'll all say that. They just want him to go away. Why are your Republican colleagues across the aisle still so beholden to this man? And again, I say that as a Republican. I mean, do they have these conversations with you behind the scenes that they wish he'd go away, and then they go on TV and they praise him? I mean, what is happening here?
No, they really don't, unfortunately. I'll be honest. I know that on the other side of the aisle in the House, they're literally being told, you don't vote with a Democrat. End of story. You just don't. I had a conversation with one of my colleagues who I said, who was asking if a particular piece of mine was still in the infrastructure bill. And I said, yes, it was. I said, well, you can vote for it. No, I can't. And to which I stopped and said, listen, you don't work for these people over there. You work for your constituents. I've stood up to Speaker Pelosi multiple times. I have stood there as she asked me to not vote for a particular bill and said, respectfully, Madam Speaker, neither one of us wants to be having this conversation right now, but that's not going to happen. Put my card in the slot and voted for the way I needed to vote for my district and my constituents. And so I just don't know if we don't have enough people who lack, I think too many people lack courage. That's one thing I absolutely believe, to stand up for what's right. And they then become embroiled within a structure, which is the Republican Party out in the House, that has told them, you don't act outside of what we say. So when you put those two pieces together, where you're not willing to stand up because you're in this maybe more for your party than you are for doing some positive changes for your constituents, you couple that with leadership that says, you go outside this and you're not getting any money, you're not getting any support, be careful about the committees and what you want to be on. I think that's half the battle, is just that There are people who want to stay in Congress and they hope to stay in Congress, and they are being, I believe, I've got to choose my words carefully here, Miles. They are basically believe that if they step outside of the lines, that chance is a lot more difficult for them to achieve in the next election.
Well, I'll be less diplomatic than you, Congresswoman. Some of these people just want to be famous. And it's such a surreal thing to see. You don't go to Congress to become famous. And you've developed a reputation as a total workhorse and not a show horse. You don't go out and try to be on cable news every single day. And there's these other members of Congress who've said publicly that they don't even hire policy people on their staff who know the issues. They just hire communication staff members because they are busy tweeting all day and Instagramming and going on television. That's not the job of a congressperson. I want to ask you, this cycle, if you had to pull out your crystal ball, where are we going to end up in November? Are we going to have more rational people coming into this Congress, or are we going to see the ranks of the crazies swell? And what can we do about it?
Well, I'm a hopeful person, and I always, I'll go back to the first Star Wars movie I've ever saw as a kid when my dad took me there. The good guy wins in the end, right? And I know America is better than this. And I know America is better than some of the people that have somehow made it into the halls of Congress. And I know that they, Republicans and Democrats alike, there are folks who I believe are there for, they maybe believe they're there for their overall right intention, but they keep pushing ideology instead of helping us figure out how to get things done. I think the American public's tired of it, quite honestly. I think that folks like a gentleman I was talking to earlier today who wants to support Democrats and Republicans as long as they're reasonable, pragmatic, solutions oriented, and willing to work together for the better of this country. And not hold off getting anything done just because it doesn't fit with a certain narrative they have. I think Americans are wanting people like that right and left. And I think the more that we deal with this difficulty and divisiveness in this country, the more we're seeing people coming together and saying, please, can you do this? I just left an event in one of my new counties. We'll have 21 counties, knock on wood, I win again, and left a town that I was in called Ottumwa. And I was at a brewery, and there were a couple Republicans hanging out, having some beers. They didn't know I was coming there to do a meet and greet, but they were trapped in the room at the back of the bar, and I'm at the front, so they have to listen to the whole thing. And they walk out, they turn to my field director, and they said, we weren't here to listen to her. We were here just having a couple beers, but my God, we really like what she has to say. She's got our votes. And so they are searching for people who are just wanting to help families do what I say are, in my book, three things: put more money in average working people's pockets, give more opportunity for their families, and in states like Iowa, honestly, level the playing field so that we can get ahead. Because when I got out to place, when I first looked at the board on my first vote, I remember looking up people voting. And I thought, oh, California, 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 New York, New York, New York, New York, Florida, Florida, Florida. I said, well, my God, I got to be the voice of 10 representatives to get anything done out here. And that's what I've done. I go out and I listen to people. I was the most bipartisan member of our delegation. I was named the most accessible freshman member of Congress, visited 16 counties every month, held town halls I held just shy of 70 town halls before COVID hit. Then we had to go online and do things. But it's about going out, listening to people, bringing their issues with you to Washington, acting on those through real pragmatic stuff like this infrastructure bill, like mental health issues for our veterans, like a bill I'm introducing on Thursday to help our smaller police forces who don't get as much support. That's what they want to see done. And that's what I'm out there doing. And the more that people step up like that, I can guarantee you they'll get elected, because they're tired of these, these folks that are just off the charts in the way that they speak, and they don't address the issues we're facing.
Well, let's talk about some of the crazy, because there's been this wild theory propagated that if the Republicans retake control of the House of Representatives, that there's some people in the Republican caucus who would like to see Donald Trump become the Speaker of the House. It sounds like a crazy thing, but a lot of Americans don't realize You don't have to be an elected member of Congress to be Speaker. Anyone can be named Speaker of the House. Have you heard folks talking about this on the House floor? Do you think it's a legitimate concern? Could something that crazy actually happen if the Republicans retake the House? Would there be votes for Donald Trump to be the Speaker?
Well, I'm afraid there would be votes for Donald Trump to be the speaker. But we even have a more dire threat really ready at hand that I think about all the time. If we lose the House and the Republicans gain the majority, which we have a 5-vote majority, which is why I'm the #1 targeted race by the NRCC in the country. The intent is that Jim Jordan becomes head of judiciary and begins impeachment proceedings against the president for nothing that could be impeachable. But he's already stated, things, the debt's too high, or Afghanistan. And so he'll drag the president they'll drag the president through the mud for 2 years, literally just to bring him down so that we would lose the presidency. This is truly what they're after. So whether they vote to put Trump as speaker, or whether Jim Jordan is head of judiciary to begin completely false narrative impeachment proceedings, what I'm saying is that's their intention. Their intention is to take over the House to fulfill what really is something that you know as well as I do started decades ago, and finalize that, and then we lose the presidency and get who knows back in office. So it is very scary. And that is why, to your question earlier, a lot of folks I don't think have stepped up to it. It took months, if not a year, for some of our representatives here in Iowa to say that it was a real election and that Joe Biden is our true president. So folks just don't want to talk about it because I think they think their future could possibly include President Trump.
I've said this a lot recently. I keep using this anecdote, and I asked the person who told me this story if I could keep using it without naming them, and they encouraged me to. But it's someone who's very close to the sitting president, to Joe Biden, a close advisor of his, who told me if he was down to his last $1,000 and he was in Las Vegas and he had to bet it on who was going to be president of the United States in 2025, he would bet it would be Donald Trump. Now, it's one thing for me to say that, but another thing for a close ally of President Biden to say that's the way the wind is blowing. I think folks are very concerned about us slipping back into that period. Again, I say this as a Republican, but I also style myself as Mr. Brightside. So I want to look at a silver lining here and ask you, Congresswoman, about something that we've been calling coalition campaigning. There's a number of really interesting things happening in our politics, especially this cycle, of folks on the right, disaffected Republicans who are frustrated with the radicalism in the party, actually teaming up with Democrats in key races around the country to help Democrats go win in their races and supporting them. This has folks kind of excited that there may be some long-term potential behind this idea of coalition campaigning and sort of cross-partisan elections. I wonder what you make of that. And have you been seeing a little bit more of that, of concerned conservatives willing to listen to the other side because they're worried that their own party is being hijacked by extremists?
Absolutely. And ever since my first election, I've had Republicans for Cindy Axne. So I found these folks ages ago and asked them to get on mailers for me and et cetera. Listen, I don't leave anything behind when I run for an office because, as I mentioned, I'm not beholden to anybody. I'm beholden to the people that I serve here. And so when I go out and win an election, I'm reaching out to everybody. We have equally as many independents here in Iowa as we do Republicans and Democrats. And quite honestly, many more moving towards independent. I think because of a lot of what you're talking about, Miles, they don't like, the ideology framing on either side, and they want to just get the job done. So what they do is they just look for the people that they think do that best. And fortunately, I'm a pretty independent thinker, and so I've got a lot of their support. But I do believe there are absolutely Republicans who are, really sad to see where things are at. Listen, my parents voted for Ronald Reagan. I grew up in a Republican family. A lot of people in Iowa grew up in Republican families. We like to talk about our great governor, Robert Ray here, who was a really great governor and a Republican governor. Unfortunately, those days of Robert Ray are gone, and they need to come back. Somebody who, really cared about the people that he served, didn't look at things from a partisan perspective. And I can tell you, when I go out there, I know that's what people want. And I know that's why they'll elect people like me and others that they believe can represent them. To your point about, conservative Republicans, they don't want to see the name calling. They don't want to see the lies. They just want to see people stand up and work for them. And it's why I can go out and talk to a 6th-generation row crop farmer Republican and talk things like taxes, because I'm in there fighting for not to have the stepped up basis so they can pass their farms on. They're like, wait a minute, we actually like you. You're coming in here. You will talk to us about the hard issues and help us find a solution. You won't just come in here and give us lip service and then go back out and do something different. You're actually asking us to be a part of the solution. And that's what conservative Republicans who want to support folks like me are looking for. People who will actually listen to everybody, because I'll be honest, I think most answers are right in the middle. And when we can get to those answers, we really are serving all of this country.
Well, look, Congresswoman, you are a person who goes and meets people where they're at, even if that's a wonderful craft brewery in Iowa. So we wish we were on the campaign trail with you, because it sounds like it could be a good time every now and again. I want to ask you, as we round out here in the next few minutes, just some questions about who is Cindy Axne. Let's put the Congress and the politics aside. People really like to find out that their members of Congress are not robots. They're real human beings. You're not a lifelong politician. You're a businesswoman, well respected in the community. You like to have fun. I'm sure you read interesting things. Give us a recommendation right now. What's a good book that you're reading, or a good TV show you've been able to watch, maybe on commutes back and forth to DC, or a movie? Give us something fun to spend our time with on the weekends. What are you entertaining yourself with right now?
All right. Well, I run the full spectrum here, so I'm reading Malala's book right now, and I'm watching Broad City. So those two could not be too further away from each other. I love comedy. I love stand-up comedy. I love anything that makes me crack up and get away from all of the difficult conversations that are out there. So those are a couple of things I'm reading and watching right now.
Ted Lasso. Are you a Ted Lasso fan?
I'm waiting for the next season. I'm done with that. I love Ted Lasso. That was great. I loved his whole attitude. So that's another good one. And listen, I've been binging, just like a lot of Americans, a little too quickly. Oh, Marvelous Miss Maisel. I like that.
There you go.
Back on.
Great show.
Comedy mixed with women standing up for their voices. So I like that mixture. And so I'm a little bit across the board. One of the things in my debate was they always ask you who's on your playlist. And I literally have everybody from AC/DC to Polo G to TV on the radio, to Kasabian, and people are frantically Googling, who are these bands? So I just run a whole different reality, I think, because to your point, I'm just a normal person and just have lived my life before being an elected official as a mom of 2 lightly supervised teenage boys, as a wife of my good husband and our small business. And I like to laugh every now and again.
Speaking of laughing, I want to ask you this, and I'm putting you on the spot, so maybe you don't have a good answer. Who's the funniest member of Congress? Is there anyone whether it's on your side of the aisle or the other, is there anyone who's just a real jokester on the House floor that we don't realize is very, very funny?
Yeah. So Mark Pocan is pretty funny. Representative Pocan out of Wisconsin.
Okay. That's a good endorsement. We have to get this in front of Mark. We're going to be running ads for Mark. He's a pretty funny guy.
Yeah, he's a pretty funny guy. He's a funny guy. And I'll tell you what, Jamie Raskin can pull some funny stuff out.
I've heard that too.
He's so smart. He just is so smart. And so when, listen, here's one of the funny, last election when I was under attack, some outside group came in with some crazy ad showing Jamie Raskin in a photo with me because I needed him for something. And so they showed Jamie Raskin with me. Well, nobody knew who Jamie Raskin was. And at the same time, they put in the, who is it? The song from Monty Python. And so it was Jamie Raskin and a Monty Python song. And Jamie got a hold of that. And he just had to do something with it. He thought that
yeah.
He started fundraising off of that for me because he loved that Monty Python came in on the attack on Jamie Raskin. It was a very weird situation.
American politics today, completely unpredictable. Congresswoman, leave us with one thing, something that would maybe give our listeners and viewers hope about the state of our politics. It looks really broken from the outside, it feels really broken on the inside. What's something that maybe in the past couple of weeks or past few months has given you a measure of optimism about the direction that we're headed?
I think the infrastructure bill has given me a large measure of optimism. The other thing is, I want to say I've had good conversations with Senator Manchin on voting rights issues. When I tell Iowans that I say I'm going to talk to somebody, I don't just tell them that, I do it. And so I got a hold of Senator Manchin to talk with him about the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better, as well as voting rights. I think he is absolutely trying to come to the table with something very sound. And I'm glad to see the conversation still existing around that. It's unfortunate that we're not getting where we need to. But I would say that, he's trying to put forth a bill that he believes that Republicans could get behind, that it really reflects the Constitution and the framework of how we should be in this country. And I think he's working towards that. So I'd say there's stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people really don't know about. And that would be one good example.
So you think that this year there's a good chance we'll see some type of voting rights legislation to protect the vote?
I don't know if I could go that far to say that. We've got to work through obviously keeping government open, the budget, still working on that. We've got pieces of the Build Back Better that I'd like to see done, working family pieces like, childcare. I can tell you, we talked bridges earlier. Nobody's told me that they can't get to a job because a bridge is down, but we've got 100-child waiting list in towns that are, 1,400, 1,500 people here in Iowa. That's why they're not getting to work. And so we've got a lot of those things to work through. Now, of course, we really want to push for the voting rights, and there are many states that realize that they're under grave duress right now unless we get something done. So hopefully that will be the impetus that does bring it this year. But what I can say is it has not been left behind, and that there are sound minds who are working on it.
Well, that is very good to hear. Congresswoman Cindy Axne, a workhorse, not a show horse, a bipartisan champion. We are so grateful that you joined us today. Thank you for what you are doing. Democrats and Republicans are cheering you on, and we're grateful for you actually keeping your head down and doing the people's work in Washington. So thank you so much for joining us today and for what you do.
Thanks so much, everybody.
And if you enjoyed this Ram Chat, please tune in soon. We've got some exciting guests coming up, and follow us on social media. You can find us on Twitter @Renew America. Thank you for joining us today.